Hi, welcome to Pyrography Made Easy. I'm Brenda. In this episode, I am going to be trying out a number of different items to see how well they work as straight edges for burning straight lines in pyrography. So come along with me and find out what works and what doesn't. For best results, start at the top of the line and pull the pen tip down towards yourself. Keep your hand, wrist, and forearm locked or in a fixed position. Move your hand via the shoulder. Your arm stays locked and the movement comes from pulling your arm back via the shoulder. Do not move your hand at the wrist. The grain direction of the board can have an impact on your line. The line being burned to the left of the blue bar is being burned against the grain. The line to the right is with the grain. Burning with the grain is easier to do, and the results are generally more even and uniform in color. The type of pen tip can make a difference. Currently, I'm using a writer pen tip. It has a larger and more rounded tip when compared to the skew that I was using. The rounder tip allows it to sit on the surface more than the skew does. This makes it slightly more prone to catching, skipping, or bouncing on the grain lines. This micro writer pen tip has a much smaller tip, so it sinks into the surface of the wood a bit more. The resulting line looks a lot better than what was done with the larger writer. That is, as long as I burn with the grain. Burning against the grain, and the pen tip tends to skip and bounce around a bit. This large ball pen tip really shows the impact of burning with or against the grain lines. The line to the left of the blue bar is being burned against the grain, to the right with the grain. The right side is much smoother and more uniform in color. For all of the following demos, I will be using a skew pen tip and burning with the grain. I begin by drawing a line with a pencil to use as a guide. Then I freehand burning in the line, following the pencil mark. Next, I'm using a metal ruler straight edge. The metal is thick and it quickly becomes a heat sink, so the pen tip can't stay hot enough to burn the wood. I increased the heat on my burner and tried again. This time I got part of a line before the metal ruler sucked the heat away from the pen tip. Now I'm using a thin metal sheet as a straight edge. I was able to burn a longer line than I could with the metal ruler, but eventually the metal sheet drained the heat from the pen tip. Comparing the edges of the metal sheet and ruler together, you can see that the metal sheet was about half the thickness of the ruler. I'm using an X-Acto knife to cut a deep line into the board. I recut over the line just to make sure it's deep. Then I place the pen tip into the cut line and gently pull it down towards myself. It is important to let the pen tip follow along in the groove created by the knife. Next up is a piece of 140-pound watercolor paper. I don't know what the brand is. I just have a pile of leftover pieces for testing. The watercolor paper worked extremely well. So then I decided to try cardstock. It's not as thick as the watercolor paper, but it too worked fairly well. Then I tried a piece of cardboard. This is from the back of a paper pad. The cardboard was too thick and it became a heat sink. So I tried the cardboard again, but I turned up the heat on my burner, and that still didn't produce very good results. Now I'm trying a really thick piece of 9-ounce leather. That didn't work very well at all. Then I tried a piece of thin 2-ounce leather. That worked better, but it still wasn't great. After that, I decided I would burnish the edge of the leather. So I wet it out with some water and then used a burnishing tool or a slicking tool along the edge of the leather. Then I tried it again as a straight edge, and the results didn't improve, so leather does not work. Next up, I tried really thin die-cut plywood. This worked really well, and it is sturdy enough that I would trust it for multiple uses. After that, I tried a piece of glass, and that did not work. It became a heat sink. Then I tried aluminum tape. This is used in air conditioning and heating ductwork applications. It worked okay. It wasn't thick enough to provide a good, sturdy, straight edge. The next thing I tried was Cricut's heat-resistant tape. This did not work. It is really thin and the pin tip easily cuts into the tape. The last thing I tried was Todd's idea of using a thick block of wood that the handset rests on as a guide. The pin tip does not come in contact with the block of wood. This idea worked extremely well. Which of the experiments worked? 1. The freehand method. 4. The X-Acto knife. 5. The 140-pound watercolor paper. 6. Thick cardstock. 11. Thin plywood. And of course, 15. Todd's idea. Well, that is it for this video. Obviously, there was more than one item that could be used to burn a straight line. Which one works best? Well, I think that depends on what you have on hand and what you're comfortable with. Well, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon.